The screen flickered as the man typed his story into the computer. His mind was racing, and so was his heart. He wanted the world to know as soon as possible about what he had discovered, what lay ahead, what nearly ended his life. As he typed, he turned his head every now and then, as though he was expecting something to attack him. His paranoid thoughts kept getting the best of him as he turned in a frantic movement, only to see the dark of his room. He thought the power was out for some odd reason, but he didn't really know. It was so dark in his room, but the computer was still working. This only added to the fear he had. The shadows that came from objects in his room made him feel crowded and small. He felt scared. He felt weak. He felt alone. A loud bang came from the hallway of his house. The sound of metal pots clanging together filled his ears. He started to type faster and more frantically, so people could be aware of this thing. It was in vain. He had finished the first few paragraphs, but his fear got to him and he could not continue. Instead, he hid in the darkest part of his room, covered, hoping and praying that this thing didn't find him. He saw what it had done to the others. He knew what would happen to him, and he knew that his chance of living were small. As he hid, he heard the breathing from the thing get closer, and he could hear the footsteps reaching his room. The breathing from the door. The thing was getting more and more close. The door creaked open, and a small light from the candles he had placed shone into his room. He was still perplexed as why everything was dark, but the computer was still working. He heard the door slam behind it, and the footsteps walked towards the computer. Something smashed against the wall directly above him. The object fell on his head and made a loud cracking sound. Though he was in a concussion now, he realized with anguish and shock that it was his computer. He heard the footsteps walk closer to him, the heavy dragging of its feet reaching closer and closer. His breathing grew more frantic and heavy as his head throbbed in pain. The footsteps stopped right in front of where he was hiding, and then he heard no more, almost as though it had vanished. He slowly pushed away the objects that hid him and opened his eyes. At first, he saw nothing. He felt relieved and let out a sigh. He jumped in shock as he heard a small chuckle from behind him. As this man turned, he uttered out a scream, but never finished. He was completely silenced from then on. His throat was slashed to keep him from screaming. His stomach was torn open, and his internal organs were pulled out. The thing that tore him opened a pouch and added his organs to an already stuffed bag filled with various body parts. Before the man passed out, the thing stomped on his head with its ugly foot. His skull was smashed into bits. One of the quickest deaths it's done. The next morning, there was no trace of him, no blood, no body parts, not even the broken computer. He had simply vanished. I witnessed this event from my house next door, and I know soon it will come for me. It comes from anyone that knows of it. To the next person to read about him, to the next person that listens to its story, to the person that listens to this, you. Good luck, my friend, for as I type this, my own time runs out. Rob brings a girl to our annual cottage weekend for the first time in 8 years, rounding out our group to an even 6. Initially, we are wary of including someone we didn't quite know, but it isn't too long before she wins us over with her personality and her friendliness. And as a bonus, She's brought with her salted caramel cupcakes, an after-dinner treat that we devour as we sit around a campfire exchanging the scariest stories we'd ever heard. "You go first, new girl," we encouraged. She shakes her head. "I'd actually like to go last if you don't mind. I want to hear all your stories first." Most of the tales are urban legends. Humans can lick too. Aren't you glad you didn't turn out the light? And several versions of a young couple meeting an unfortunate fate while trapped in a car in the dead of night. Then it's her turn. Honestly, stories with blood and gore don't scare me. They're so over the top, so implausible, that they're more ridiculous than they are frightening. "What's scary to me are the mindfucks," she continues, tapping an index finger to her temple. "The unexpected, the unknown. Not ghosts, mind you, or chain-wielding maniacs, but ordinary people like you and I. For example, a stranger spends a weekend at the cottage with her boyfriend and his friends," she says as she holds up her uneaten cupcake, "and feeds them some homemade pastries." I could only think. I lacked any physical form or sensations. I was simply somewhere. The area wasn't big or small. It was just empty, beyond all comprehension. This was hell. Hell in every meaning of the word. I had no mouth, but I had no will or reason to want to scream. I just existed. I don't know how long I'd been there. It could have been for an eternity, or even a few seconds. I remember wanting to just feel something, anything. I was completely deprived of all emotional and physical stimulation, and due to this, I could barely think straight. I tried to remember something, but I couldn't. I just wanted to feel. Then, everything stopped. The alarm had woken me up, as it had for the past year or so. I turned the bedside lamp on and began to feel the lack of a companion beside me, and suddenly remembered that she had left me for someone else. The emptiness I felt in the dream came back, so I just ripped the alarm clock out of the wall and took a large drink from the scotch bottle on my nightstand. After sitting there for a few moments, I laid back down, bearing in mind that I could not escape my own mind no matter my state of consciousness. I went back to sleep, not sure whether to hope for death or ignorance. I don't think there's much of a difference in my case. I'm afraid to look outside windows at night. I guess some people are. It's just paranoia, right? You don't want to look outside your window at night and come face to face with some creature. But again, it's just paranoia, right? Too many scary movies, spending too much time on creepypasta. Well, let me just tell you that you have a reason to be scared. Occasionally you'll glance outside the window. You might want to know what the weather is, or you might have a completely different reason. Regardless of your reason, you're not expecting anybody to be standing on thin air outside your window. You look at your computer screen. It's getting late. It's just you and your friend at home. You look over at him and realize that he's fallen asleep already. You should go to sleep too, but you want to spend a bit more time reading some more creepypastas. You see a shadow in your peripheral vision and immediately shift your eyes to the window. Nothing. You're relieved. You look back at your computer screen and hear a loud thud on your window. You shift your eyes to the window again, a bit more scared this time. You were right to be scared. You see your friend's body hanging outside your window. You're horrified. It's then you realize that your friend was in his bed just a few minutes ago. You look over at his bed and you see someone laying there. That's not your friend. I groggily opened my eyelids in an attempt to pull myself out of slumber. My eyes burned with exhaustion as it was still the middle of what had been a long night. I reached for the glass of water sitting on my bedside table. My warm hand enveloped the condensation as I pulled the glass nearer to my face. It dripped. I made an attempt to sit up to avoid drenching myself in an ice-cold bath. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't move my torso. My throat was parched and I grabbed it in desperation. As I stared at the glass, it taunted me. My throat tightened, becoming incredibly dry with every bead of water that rolled off the glass. The mental taunting continued and eventually changed to a whisper. I couldn't understand the voice. It mumbled incoherently in my ear. My arms were forced at my side and the glass of water was flung to the wall. It shattered a storm of shards and wetness all over the room. The shards fiercely pierced my skin. Hot, sticky blood began to spread over my body. The voice turned into many voices, and they wouldn't cease. I screamed out for help. I was so desperate. Only no sound came out. I felt sharp nails scrape the back of my throat and the blood was filling my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. The whispers were shouts of incomprehensible rants. They gave me a fear of loathing. I was gasping for one final breath, but I only inhaled blood. As I drifted away from life, the yells returned to a peaceful whisper, almost a sing-song voice. My lungs cleared and I felt them lighten. My throat opened up. I was no longer parched. My crusted eyes opened with ease, and I realized where I was now residing. I found myself stranded at the gates of hell. I didn't even fight the charges. I admitted to the murders, and even made sure I committed them in a state where the death penalty is still in effect. Why run the risk of a painful death in prison when you can have the state put you down quick on their dime? I was guilty, I was sentenced to death, and I was happy. They took me into the execution chamber. I don't know if they still called it that, but I've been thinking and hoping for a while, then that would be my final sight. It was clean and sterile, white tile walls and floors to enhance that notion. As they strapped me onto the slab, I looked at the window across from me and saw only myself, the doctor, and the executioner. One-way mirror, I guessed. I was hoping to see the families all together one more time since the trial, but I guess I can settle for them seeing me. Straps tightened and they stick the needle in. They asked me if I had any last words. It's been fun. I scanned across the window. I'll see your kids soon. Canister 1 emptied its contents into my bloodstream. Supposed to be sodium thiopental to drop me unconscious. They must have messed up the dosage though, because I only got to drowsy before the next injection. It was to cause the paralysis. Now, that one they got right. I froze in place, taking in only the shallowest of breaths. Then was supposed to come the other one to stop the heart. But I don't know what they injected me with instead. A burning pain flooded through my body, from my arm to my heart to everywhere else in an instant. I felt fire behind my eyes and in my gut. I would have screamed in agony if it wasn't for the first needle. A minute of this goes by. That felt like 100. Then I heard my heart rate monitor flatline. I was legally dead, but it sure as hell didn't feel like it. They unstrapped me, threw me on a gurney, and rolled me to the morgue, burning from the inside out. They slapped me carelessly on a slab and locked me in a refrigerated cell. Now, with my skin freezing and the insides boiling, I'm wishing I fought for life imprisonment, or that one of the families had shot me dead in the courthouse. Please, God, just let me take back what I've done, because I've been in here for weeks now, and I'm just praying they do an autopsy before I'm buried in this hell. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.